Hello everyone, this is Frank Osborne. Well now, my guest this evening is one of those Mersea personalities who are so community minded and give freely of their time for the benefit of others. He's none other than Mr. Eric Heathcote, who holds the office of Community Services Liaison Worker. It's quite a mouthful. Good evening, Eric. You do other things as well in your off-duty time, I believe.
Oh, good evening, Frank, and good evening to all your listeners as well. Yes, since moving on to the island some 4 years ago now, I've become involved with the Mersea Island Society. I'm on the Parochial Church Council, the Deanery Synod, the Micro Executive, and run the tea dances for them, and I've done several Colchester 17 years ago.
Right, Eric. Well, tell us all about the Handicapped Club, how it was formed.
Well, it's quite an interesting story, really, because way back in '74, the social workers who covered this area, that was Bill Reedman, Diane Roach and Daphne Taylor, as she was then, she's now married to Daphne Midwood, said, we've a lot of handicapped on Mersea Island, why can't we have a club there? And I said, right, you give me a list of the people you want to come and show me the need and I'll take it from there. And this they did. They went to visit all their clients and came up with quite a lengthy list. It was a question of finding somewhere to meet. I approached the WI, who were very kind to us, and said we could use their hall. In fact, they didn't charge us in those early days. And then I wrote to the various organisations on the island asking, if they would like to come along and help us. And I'm afraid the response was rather poor, really, and we would begin to wonder, well, shall we get it off the ground? But we would do, because we would run it ourselves until such times we've got somebody else to do it. And then one afternoon I had a telephone call, and the lady said that she'd heard that we were going to run a club for the handicapped. She was a retired nurse. Would we like her to help? Now that lady was Dorothy Smith, who I'm sure everybody knows, and I think that is when the Handicapped Club on the island got going. We had several preliminary meetings and talked about what we would do and how we would do it. Then early in October of that year, we had our first meeting. We had a terrific crowd there, 6 of them. One who was in a wheelchair and said, you don't need a club for the physically handicapped on the island, there aren't anybody. Well, I think if one looks at how the club has progressed over the years and the membership now, I think we soon put him right. However, what meant was that of those 6 there, 4 were immediately elected onto the committee. Mr. Best became chairman, Mr. Cox became treasurer, Mrs. Smith was the secretary, and Mr. Burgess was another committee member together with myself. And that was our committee. Well, Dorothy worked very hard and recruited more people, and the club grew quite rapidly, so that by the time Christmas came we were up to 19 members. The transport was done by myself and the other social workers. In fact, we used to gather for lunch in the White Hart, so sometimes, I think we've been breathalyzed, sometimes we may not have been able to bring them in. And we went off in all directions and we did various things, and the club was growing all the time. Spring of '75, we had our first fundraising meeting. It was a coffee morning, and we had Mrs. Buck, now Lady Buck, and we had the then first mayor of the new Colchester, Councillor James Jackson. And we did very well at that, because I think we took about £90 even then. Also that year we had our first outing. Well, of course, the policy is when you're arranging outings for people like this, you must survey the scene first. What are the toilets like? Things like this. And, of course, it's nice to have some ladies with you, because if you're on your own, trying to survey a ladies' toilet can be extremely difficult. It might not be too bad getting in, but, you've got to make sure that when you come out, nobody sees you come out, otherwise you can end up in jail or something.
They might think you're a little odd.
Well, that's right. Anyway, I took Dorothy with me and Daphne, and we called at Blytheborough, that's right, for refreshment, because it's thirsty work, of course, doing that job. And at that time I had a little German car called an NSU, and it used to be a bit temperamental and wouldn't start. Well, I knew how to make it start, you see. So we got in and it wouldn't start. So I gets out, kicks it very hard, swears at it and shakes it, and it goes. Well, of course, you can imagine Daphne and Dorothy's faces see me doing all this. But you see, it went, and this is how it used to work. Possibly because it was a German, I don't know. However, we went to Southwold and they had a very good outing there in July. And interesting enough, the coach cost us £20 and the fish and chip tea rather, I think cost us, was it £16? So I think prices have gone up a little bit since then, but so has everything else. Well, the club flourished very well until 76 when we had a little bit of financial trouble. It wasn't we hadn't got any money, we'd got quite a nice lot of money, but unfortunately the treasurer wouldn't let us spend it. And the outcome was we had to freeze the accounts and had to have an extraordinary general meeting, which I chaired. It was a very difficult one. One person who shall be nameless walked out and somebody went to fetch him back. And it was quite an exciting meeting. Everything was happening. Anyway, the outcome of that was that Tom, who we all know, Tom Millett, took the chair. Ralph Luckham became our treasurer. Dorothy, of course, was still continuing as secretary. Well, the club grew and grew, and they all recruited new people. Tom, of course, got his wife, Betty, involved, and Mrs. Foote came along. We had all sorts of people arrive. Our transport grew, and everything was going very, very nicely indeed. And we continued that, and the club grew. Membership was increasing. They had some marvellous outings. One year they hosted the handicraft exhibition for this area for the Colchester Rural Age Concern, which was a big undertaking, but it went very, very well indeed. They attended some very nice rallies organised by that organisation, one at Learmarney Towers and one out at Westwood Park at Great Hawksley. And all that time, of course, our president had been Dr. Alec Grant. But in 1981, due to illness, he decided to give up, which was very sad because he'd been great support to us and always attended the meetings until the last few years. And of course, as you know, then we had to look for a new president. And I don't know how you came into the limelight, Frank, but you've been our president ever since, and I think we've been very grateful for your support and certainly your generosity. You've done an awful lot to maintain the club's expansion.
Yeah, well, thank you, Eric. In fact, Dorothy Smith came along to the council office one day when I happened to be down there, and they put the case to me, and would I like to be president? And I said I considered it a great honour. Yes, I would.
Well, I think we were very lucky to get you, and let's hope, we celebrated 10 years. Let's hope we're both with them in the next 10 years.
Oh,
Who knows? Who knows?
Drink to that.
And the other thing, one of the first things that you did, and I was very pleased you brought this up, was brought up the question of the premises we were using. That was the WI Hall. The club was then so large that obvious the risk of fire was quite horrifying, and I was very pleased that the executive, one of them, that when you brought that up, and of course, what did? We moved to Mica, which is what it was all about. That's what it was there for, and I think we've been very happy at the Mica Centre ever since. Dorothy also gave up being the secretary because I'm sure you remember the time when she produced a list of the things she did, and I think there was about 32 things on the list, something like that. And Vida...
It was a very heavy burden for Dorothy, wasn't it? Let's face it.
I think it was, and she was feeling the strain, I think.
Well, she had... Arthur wasn't too well, was
No,
it?
that's right. There were several things in the office. So, it was, although we were very sad, but she didn't leave us. She remained with us and still with us, isn't she? But I think we owe an awful lot to Dorothy.
She still does a lot, doesn't she?
Oh, she's good support. And of course Arthur was as well.
Yeah.
And I think this is where we must thank the Lions for the work they've done over the years with holidays and goodness knows what.
Okay.
Anything we wanted, they've always been forthcoming, as many organisations on the island. So, we've got the St.
Vida
John's.
then took over, didn't she?
Vida took over.
Vida Cormac.
That's right. She'd been doing it for a while, assistant secretary, and she took it on. She's kept it up very well indeed, and she produces most marvellous programmes.
Yeah.
And I think this is part of the success of the club, isn't it? Is the fact that we have a varied programme. It isn't one of those where you just come along and sit and chat. And
No.
there's always something doing, and they kept abreast of what is available to them. And I think this is very, very good. We've had some marvellous characters. I'm say we've still got some. I would say one of the original members is still with us. That's Mrs. Burgess, still going strong, very supportive to us. And of course Grace Mole, I think everybody knows Grace, and I can always recall the time when she had the car. If you remember, every time Grace came out in a car, the streets of Mersea were clear. And I remember standing in the doorway at the WI Hall once and saying to Grace, "Come in, Grace," and she did, but she brought a car with her.
And she had a disconcerting way of halting a car in the middle of the road, parking it in the middle of the road and getting out, didn't
That's
she?
right, that's right. And I can always remember going to a meeting once at Dorothy's, and when Grace had gone and all Dorothy's standard roses were flattened because she went over the lot of them. But there we are, without these characters.
So that's how he started, and you know, continued on to now. And it's, as you say, a very thriving club, and a very interesting one for them to give them a break every fortnight.
Well, I think this is important. I'm going to say, you know, we're always looking to new ways. I'm at the moment investigating the possibility of a daycare centre in the Mica Centre itself. And I'm hoping this is the sort of thing again that might be of benefit to the people. Obviously we want to open that to those who can't get out for various
What
reasons.
would you term a daycare centre? What actually would it do?
Well, a daycare centre, the idea there is to give people a break from their four walls. They go about 10 o'clock in the morning and leave again about 2:30 in the afternoon.
Excellent idea. Excellent.
But it requires a lot of work.
It will do.
Yes. And I think, you know, with the club, it's opened a lot of doors to many, many people whose life would be pretty dreary without it. And I think our band of helpers are really terrific.
Yes, and we mustn't forget all those helpers and drivers, you know, Eric, that come along and make all this possible. I mean, there's the organising by the transport manager and the secretary and that. There's still the unsung heroes, which are the
Well, quite. I'm saying one person comes to mind because he's Ralph Luckham. I'm saying
Yes.
he was the treasurer, then he became the transport manager, and now he's taking on the handicrafts.
Yeah.
You know, and he's going great guns.
Well, Eric, the time is the enemy as usual. Well, Eric, been most interesting, and I would like to thank you on behalf of everybody for coming along this evening, giving up your time.
Well, thank you for letting me come, Frank. And it's quite an honour, actually, to be, you know, put on tape like this, and I hope everybody, you know, enjoys it.